Applications of percents. Our objective is to use common applications of percents, as well as estimate with percents. Why learn this? Sales representatives use percents to calculate their total pay. Vocabulary to know. Commission. Money paid to a person or company for making a sale. Now, this is usually a percentage of the sale amount. Interest is the amount of money charged for borrowing money, or the amount of money earned when saving or investing money. The principal is the amount borrowed or invested. So it's that principal amount, borrowed or invested. A tip is the amount of money added to a bill for service. Oftentimes when you go to a restaurant, you pay a tip. And sales tax is the percent of an item's cost. Let's look at a business application. Ms. Barnes earns a base salary of $42,000 plus a 1.5% commission on sales. Her total sales 1 year were $700,000. Find her total pay for the year. So remember we were talking about commission. Commission is money paid to a person or company for making a sale. And it's usually a percent, well, 1.5%. Now it's not 1.5% of what she makes as her base salary, it's 1.5% of what she sells. Well, she sold $700,000 worth of whatever she's selling. So she's going to receive 1.5% of this amount. So your total pay equals your base salary plus whatever you're going to get for your commission. The base salary is your $42,000. We need to figure out the percent of total sales. So $42,000 plus whatever 1.5% of $700,000 is. Well, you can't really multiply by a percent. How would you write a percent as a decimal? Move the decimal 2 places. So when you move the decimal 2 places, you can now do 0.015 times 700,000. And just simplify. So follow your order of operations. You multiply before you add. So 10,500 is what her commission is. So that's what she's getting extra on top of what she would normally make in a year. So you have 42,000 plus 10,500. So 52,500. So Miss Barnes earns a total pay of $52,500. Not too bad. All right, well, let's look at simple interest. This deals with if you're borrowing money or you're earning interest. So either you're borrowing money and you're going to be paying more interest, or you're putting money into a savings account and you're gaining interest. So this is the formula for simple interest paid annually. So simple interest, I is interest. Principal, it's that amount that you put down or borrow. Okay? And your interest rate, R for rate, per year as a decimal. You will often see this as a percent. So when you see this as a percent, you need to change it into a decimal. So move the decimal 2 places to the left. We've talked about this a few times, but just so that way you don't forget. So interest rate per year as a decimal. They give it to you as a percent almost every time. You need to make it a decimal. And then your T is time. time is in years. So if it was 6 months, well, 6 months is half a year, so it would be 0.5. So it's always in years. So keep that in mind. All right, let's practice. Find the simple interest paid annually for 2 years on a $900 loan at 16% per year. Okay, so you have your simple interest formula. I equals P times R times T. PERT. I equal PERT. Okay, so simple interest paid annually for 2 years. So your 2, that's your T, on a $900 loan. Okay, so that's what you're borrowing. What you're borrowing or investing is your P. And 16% per year, percent. That's your rate. Keep in mind you need to make that a decimal. So move your decimal 2 places to the left. So your rate is really 0.16. Okay, so let's fill in our formula. So we have I equals 900 times 0.16 times 2. So principal, rate, time, PRT. And simply multiply it all out. And that will give you $288. So the amount of interest you're paying extra after borrowing $900, you're going to be paying an extra $288. It's your fee for borrowing money. Okay, let's look at B. After 3 months, the simple interest earned annually on an investment of $7,000 was $63. We want to find the interest rate. So the question we're trying to find, so the one that's going to remain a variable, is your R, your rate. Okay, so now let's start looking at some of other stuff. We have 3 months, we've got $7,000, and we have $63. Well, how many months are in a year? 12. So 3 months out of a year. 3/12. And we know that we've invested $7,000. So whatever you borrow or invest is your P. And when you're all said and done, you've gained an extra $63. So that's what your interest is. All right, so we have our time, our rate, our principal, and our interest. So let's fill in our formula. So we have 63 equals 7,000 times our unknown. We're trying to figure out what that R is. And our time is 3/12. So let's simplify. 7,000 times 3/12 is 1,750. R, you can't do anything with it yet. You're trying to get that by itself. And we needed to simplify the right-hand side of the equation before we could do so. Now we can divide both sides of our equation by 1,750. Remember, our ultimate goal is to get R by itself. It's multiplication. You want to do the inverse operation, so that would be division. And simplify that left-hand side. We end up with 0.036 equals R. Now, when they're talking about interest rates, it's always as a percent. Well, to make it into something you can use in a formula, you made it a decimal. Well, in the end, you want it to state a percent. So if you move the decimal to the left 2 places to make it a decimal, which way are you going to move it to make it a percent? To the right. So in the end, you have 3.6%. Let's look at estimating with percents. So the dinner check for Mariah's family is $67.95. We want to estimate a 15% tip. Step 1, for estimating, we want to deal with nicer numbers. So we can change our $67.95 to $70. Make it nice and easy. And then, numbers are generally nicer to deal with when you're dealing with things like 10. So if we're dealing with a 15% tip, well, 10% and 5%. So what is 10% of 70? Well, how many zeros do you have? You have 1. So you're going to move it one place. So 10% of 70 is $7. Step 3. Well, 5% is half of 10%. 5 is half of 10. So if we know that 10% is $7, what's half of 7? $3.50. Okay, so you have 10% and 5%. If you add those together, you will end up with 15%. So 7 plus 3.5 is 10.5. Now I know most of you guys have calculators that will do all of this for you. However, it's nice to be able to do it in your head pretty quickly and get a fairly close estimate. So we have $10.50, and that would be the tip. Let's look at another problem. The sales tax rate is 6.25%. Let's estimate the sales tax on a shirt that costs $29.50. All right. Each state has different sales tax. Like New Hampshire, for example, we don't have a sales tax on things like shirts. However, we can still simplify and practice. So the sales tax rate is 6.25%, and we want to estimate the sales tax on a shirt that costs $29.50. So, step 1. Let's start by rounding 6.25% to 6 and our $29.50 to 30. Remember, you always want to deal with nice numbers so that way things just flow a little bit faster and you get a quick estimate. So remember, when you're estimating percents, it's to make it so that it's faster and you have a general understanding of what you're paying. So you can think of 6% as 6 times 1%. So 1% of 30 is 0.13. Sorry, is 0.3. And then, since 6% equals 6 times 1%, 6 times 30 cents is 1.8, so $1.80. So your sales tax is about $1.80. And that concludes our lesson on applications of percents.